BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, welcome to this special Tuesday segment about the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. Longtime followers of Black Box Online Radio will know that I started this segment on the weekends, but it has now been regularly moved to the Tuesday segment, which you are listening to now. And if you want to follow along with all of these true crime discussions, you can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment down below if you have something to say about JonBenet Ramsey. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And I am your host, Blackbox Ned. And of course, I would like to remind everybody that you can download this show for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and all major podcasting networks under the names Black Box True Crime or Black Box Podcast. Now, the namesake for this episode comes to us for a twofold reason. The first is, as I said on some of the weekend segments, one of the first things that I wanted to do for this JonBenet series was look at the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town by Lawrence Schiller. And I've been working through that one and dividing the content into several different episodes, but Perfect Murder, Perfect Town was turned into a mini-series for CBS, and the subtitle of it was JonBenet and the City of Boulder, which you see in the title here, and the subtitle of the book is Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, the Uncensored Story of the JonBenet Murder and the Grand Jury's Search for the Truth. So there are going to be several different subjects that are going to be discussed within this particular episode, and I also gave it the name because I wanted to talk about how the city of Boulder responded to JonBenet's death. We're going back to December 26 of 1996, when JonBenet was found dead in her parents' home in Boulder, Colorado. And one of the first things that is noted in the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, it's actually in the third chapter, is that even though this was December, this was still the first homicide for Boulder, Colorado in the year of 1996. So it was a relatively safe environment in terms of crimes like murder, homicides. Crimes like that do not appear to be taking place virtually at all, but as we know from some previous discussions here on this channel, there definitely were other types of criminals that were operating, particularly sex offenders, particularly sexual predators, and this could all be very relevant to JonBenet's murder. And then there is also something that is discussed in the book, and that is that after JonBenet was murdered, they actually brought in therapists to the local elementary schools to talk to her classmates or to talk to just everybody in Boulder, Colorado, because the story was making such a big presence that they wanted to make sure that the children were safe, or that the children were at peace and they had peace of mind, or just that they were not dealing with any type of mental distress because someone of their age group had been murdered, and also highly publicized. Because one of the first things that happened after JonBenet was murdered was that her parents actually shared photos and videos of her to the media that revealed all of JonBenet's pageantry work. JonBenet was only 6 years old, but she was a very active beauty contestant. She competed in youth beauty pageants, and she was coached heavily by her mother, Patsy Ramsey, who was a former Miss West Virginia. And this is also discussed in the book. There's even a statement from someone that wrote in saying that even though it wasn't JonBenet's choice to enter the pageant world, she was 6 years old. She's not making decisions like this. When she's 4, 5, and 6, her mother was the one who put her into the pageants, but she did not overly pressure her to compete. She did not try to compete, or she did not try to make her feel bad or make her feel any type of misery during the competition process. And this is something that I think is kind of shared in other sources from some previous episodes on the channel. I do remember them talking about how Patsy Ramsey had stage 4 ovarian cancer, and she was in remission at the time, but she knew that she wasn't going to live that much longer. She was expecting that it was an ongoing battle. I mean, she wanted to do this with JonBenet because it was something that she could leave behind to her daughter. Again, Patsy was a former beauty queen, and she wanted JonBenet to experience the pageant world because it was a type of mother-daughter activity that they could bond over while Patsy was still alive. And of course, Patsy Ramsey passed away from cancer, but her father, John Ramsey, is still currently alive. And finally, there is a challenge question in the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town that is talking about a local news publication called The Daily Camera. And this is one that is asking about John Ramsey's business. He worked for a company called Access Graphics, which had just hit the $1 billion sales mark. And this was something that was publicized in the Daily Camera. And what the book is asking is, it's really a quote from someone who worked at the Daily Camera when they said, when they broke the news story about Access Graphics reaching the $1 billion sales mark, should they have bared any responsibility if that was the reason why JonBenet was targeted? And I think that this needs to be rephrased in a different way. Did revealing that piece of news encourage and tempt someone to commit the murder of JonBenet Ramsey and to write the ransom note asking for $118,000? And my honest answer is, from a moral standpoint, no, absolutely not. From a standpoint of culpability, no, absolutely not. This newspaper, any newspaper who is writing a story about a company reaching a sales goal or sales target or a sales milestone, is not responsible for murder. Did they put the idea in somebody's head? You know what, we can murder JonBenet. Maybe we can get some money out of this. Or at the very least, the Ramseys have been publicized and somebody tracked them down and then concocted the plan to murder JonBenet. No, they're absolutely not responsible. Writing a news story about a company doing well and, having some financial success does not mean that they are responsible in any way for another person's homicidal tendencies. And if you want to dispute any of this, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below. I would love to read them. And because this episode is titled The Uncensored Story, I would like to look at some statements that have been made by the medical investigators that are shared in the book Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. And these are particularly the comments that have been made by Dr. John Meyer, and they have been rephrased, though, because, of course, this is a narrative that has been written out by Lawrence Schiller. But I would like to go to page 40 in the book, and then let's have a read about what was it like when someone, a medical investigator, is examining JonBenet's body. And to be clear, Dr. Meyer examined her body at the crime scene, or more precisely, when JonBenet's body was in her home in the living room. Because remember, her father, John Ramsey, went downstairs into the wine cellar. He found JonBenet's body, and then he brought her up to the living room, for lack of a better term. And then that's when she's witnessed by everybody, and that's when Dr. Meyer examined her. Page 40. Attendants unsealed a heavy white plastic bag. JonBenet's body had been wrapped in a sterile white sheet. The sheet was placed on a steel autopsy table, whose slightly indicated that a subtray was permitting fluids to drain into a sink-type apparatus. The sheet was removed and set aside from the evidence. Dr. Meyer knew that in 9 out of 10 cases of a suspicious death, the perpetrator or an accomplice says that the bike fell on the victim, or that the child slipped in the bathtub, or some accident is concocted to explain the victim's injuries. Meyer also knew that good forensic pathology usually unveils the cause of death. Now we have to stop there immediately because this is going to tie into several different theories. The first is that, I've even been asking about this, if there was some type of accident in the Ramsey household involving John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, or their son Burke Ramsey, these would be the things that I would expect a family to go to, saying that somebody fell, saying that somebody hit their head, and then they're concocting a cover-up story. But with the JonBenet case, that didn't happen at all. As we're going to see, JonBenet was strangled with a garrote, and she was also placed in the wine cellar. Duct tape was put over her mouth, and a 2.5-page ransom note was written. Now, again, they say 9 out of 10 cases, so is this the 10th case that is going to be different? Let's see. JonBenet's body was just as Meyer had observed it 12 hours earlier in the Ramsey living room. Every stitch of her clothing, plus the ligatures on her wrist and around her neck, remained in place. Paper bags had been sealed around her hands and feet to preserve any possible trace evidence. And this is amazing that they did that, because DNA would be found under JonBenet's fingernails from an unidentified individual. Patricia Dunn, an assistant, took color slides from the coroner's office while Detective Trujillo shot photos of the police department. Dunn shot 113 frames documenting each stage of the procedure. Meyer dictated that his observations were placed into a tape recorder. The dissident is clothed in a long-sleeved, white, collarless shirt. The mid-interior chest area contains a silver star decorated with silver sequins. Tied loosely around the right wrist, overlying the sleeve, is a white cord. On the child's right sleeve there is a stain about 2.5 by 1.5 inches, which seemed consistent with mucus coming out of her mouth or nose. There are long white underwear with an elastic waistband containing a red and blue stripe. Meyer also noted that urine stains on the underwear were in the crotch area and on the front. Beneath the long underwear are white panties with printed rosebuds and the word Wednesday on the elastic waistband. The panties were also stained with urine. At the crotch, the coroner spotted several red spots that were up to 1/2 inch in diameter. Meyer then recorded the injuries that were visible with the body clothed. Beneath her right ear, at the point where the jawbone forms roughly a right angle, was a rust-colored abrasion, 3/8 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch. There was a pinpoint hemorrhaging on the upper and lower eyelids. Meyer described the cord around the child's neck as wrapped around with a double knot in the midsection of the posterior of the neck. It is a white cord similar to the cord that is tied around the wrist. He cut through the cord on the right side of the neck and slipped it off. A single black mark is placed on the left side of the cut and a double black ink mark on the right side of the cut. Meyer stated that these specifics were noted in case it would be necessary to reconstruct the cord as evidence. He also knew the police would want the knot left intact to study the technique that was used to secure the ligature. There were 2 tails of cord trailing from the knot. One was 4 inches long and frayed, and the other was 17 inches long and had multiple loops, and was around a wooden stick that was 4.5 inches long. The wooden stick is irregularly broken at both ends, Meyer said, and there are several colors of paint appearing with a glistening varnish on the surface. There was one word written on the stick: Korea. Fine blonde hair, Meyer noted, was tangled in the knot of the cord around the child's neck, as well as in the knot of the cord that was tied around the stick. The white cord is flattened and measures approximately 1/4 inch in width. It appears to be made of a white synthetic material. Also secured around the neck is a gold chain with a single charm in the form of a cross. Dr. Meyer then recorded a series of observations about a groove in JonBenet's neck by the cord. In front it was just below the prominence of her larynx. The coroner noted that the groove circled her neck almost completely horizontally, deviating only slightly upward near the back at some points, and that was close to the furrow, 1/2 inch wide. Hemorrhaging and abrasions can be seen below it. The groove included a roughly triangular abrasion about the size of a 25-cent piece on the left side of the neck. There were also green fibers tangled into the child's hair, which most believed were from a holiday garland that was decorating the spiral staircase that led downstairs from JonBenet's bedroom. This holiday garland was also noted by Detective Linda Arndt. And this is going to bring up something that I think is very important to discuss, and it relates to a poll that was actually put out by the Nancy Drew channel. And if you don't follow the Nancy Drew channel, they talk about a lot of similar subjects that I discuss here on Black Box Online Radio, most notably the Zodiac Killer and the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. And the challenge question was, and I'll throw it out to you guys, when do you think the perpetrator or attacker first made contact with JonBenet? Was it in the bedroom? Was it in the kitchen? Was it in the living room? Was it in the basement? And there are so many things that I've thought about over the years. If you had asked me this 6 years ago when I first started making episodes about JonBenet, which were just some of the old black box recordings, which I don't even invite you to listen to, those things are so rudimentary, but I would have said absolutely the perpetrator entered the bedroom, struck her on the head, silenced her, put the hand over the mouth, dragged her to the basement, and then secured the garrote around her neck, and that's how the murder took place. But over time, I've had somewhat of a reversal about that, for the fact that there is this strand of the green spiral holiday garland that got caught up in her hair. Is it possible at all that JonBenet was already in the kitchen when the perpetrator attacked her? Now, this is not a suspects episode, so I'm not going to be playing any side, or I'm not going to be defending any particular standpoint, even though you guys know that I think an intruder was responsible for JonBenet's death and it was not the family. But no matter what, this all applies. When was JonBenet first attacked by the perpetrator? And we can even say confronted, because, I mean, when it comes to the confrontations, a lot of people who think that Burke Ramsey was responsible for this believe that he was sitting in the kitchen with JonBenet. He was eating a bowl of pineapple and milk. JonBenet reached over and took a piece of the pineapple out of the bowl with her bare hands, and Burke was just so irritated he started chasing her and he struck her in the head with a blunt object. Then the family fabricated the story. But I've even wondered about one thing. This is something that I've thought about recently. And that is that if an intruder entered the home, is it possible at all that the intruder just put his hand over JonBenet's mouth while he was in bed, and he's just completely silencing her? Even if she's trying to fight, he's just putting his hand up to the mouth or saying shh, or something to the effect of, he then either brings her downstairs and he gave her the pineapple as a way to calm her down, and then she was taken to the basement. I know that sounds bizarre, and I know that's very speculative, and I know that that's making a lot of assumptions. But I'm just trying to think about how this could have been arranged, because JonBenet had undigested pineapple in her system. And if you do watch the miniseries Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, that is one of the most eye-catching parts of the entire miniseries, when they discover the undigested pineapple in JonBenet's system, because they're just asking all of these questions about, goodness, what could possibly have happened? This child was supposed to be asleep in her bed, and if somebody broke into the house or was already waiting in the house, then they go upstairs, they grab JonBenet, and then how on earth did she get pineapple into her system? And again, there's the theory that's been put forward by Burke being responsible. And the other one that I've discussed in the past is something that I'm still not completely abandoning, and that is that JonBenet could have gone to sleep after, she's already asleep when her father brings her home from the Christmas party. He's carrying her, she's asleep, they put her to bed, and then she is in bed by herself, and that she just woke up and walked downstairs by herself, and she ate the piece of the pineapple undetected, unknown by her family members, because kids do stuff like that. Then she goes back up and then is confronted by the intruder. But I was really just trying to think, is there any possibility that the intruder approached her first in the kitchen while she was doing that, and then the intruder put his hand over her mouth, grabbed the piece of pineapple as a way to calm her down? And that might sound like a ridiculous theory to some. It might sound like something that makes sense. But what do you think about this? Do you think the intruder fed JonBenet pineapple as a way to calm her down? Better yet, because I said this is not going to be suspect exclusive. Do you think the perpetrator fed JonBenet the pineapple as a way to silence her? Hey, everything's fine. Here, eat this. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to take my hand off your mouth now. Don't scream. We have to go to the basement. And this could also be absolutely anybody in the Ramsey family. Now, what do you make of those statistics about how 9 out of 10 times, if someone is trying to cover up something bad that they have done, they're going to just tell a story like, they fell, they hit their head? I agree completely. I agree completely. And that's one of the reasons why looking at the family members really has always just never sat well with me, because they had so many other options. I mean, like, if they're just trying to make up a cover story, they would have created one of the worst and most bizarre and twisted cover stories in the world. So, I mean, the Ramseys were never charged, I'll just say that. And the final thing that I will leave you from this episode is, you must have heard the part in the medical investigator's report when it was stated that JonBenet had urinated in her panties. She had urinated, and that there was evidence of this all over her, not only her interior panties, but also on the long underwear. But the focus of the book, Little Girl Blue, which is written by Sweetie B, looks at how there could have been somebody who was connected to the Ramsey household, but not one of the 3 family members who lived there, who may have been responsible. And one of the strongest pieces of evidence is that there's this theory that JonBenet wet the bed, and then she got into some type of argument with Patsy Ramsey. You can't really call it an argument when the child is 6 years old, but that she's throwing a tantrum, or that she's upset. Patsy got even more upset, and then just hit her with a blunt object, and then staged the scene to cover it up. Well, the biggest revelation in the book Little Girl Blue, which was also turned into a YouTube user-generated documentary, was that the bed was not wet on the night that JonBenet was murdered, so she didn't wet the bed. But there is a claim that somebody had changed the sheets before the police had arrived, and I'm at the point now where I don't quite believe that aspect of it, either that or I need to investigate further. That's a better way of putting it. But that would mean that Patsy struck her in the head, and then Patsy just brought her to the basement because she had to think about what she was going to do, and then that's why the ransom note was written and the garrote and everything. She was thinking about saving herself at that point. Not Burke, not John Ramsey, but Patsy did that all on her own. I have a couple problems with that because you still wouldn't have to do that. You would just do exactly what the medical investigator is saying here. Just say that she hit her head in a different way and bring her to the hospital, and people might not even suspect Patsy of any wrongdoing at that point. So I would love to know what you guys think. And you can respond to the challenge question. Where do you think the perpetrator first interacted with JonBenet? Well, and really, I think the most likely places would be the bedroom or the kitchen. The basement, I mean, I suppose if JonBenet entered the basement on her own, but I don't know why she would have done that. And also, I would like to know, did you notice anything that was abnormal about the autopsy and the coroner's statements and the medical investigator's report? And I'm going to do a much larger episode on the autopsy report for this segment here. But did anything about that stand out to you? And also, you can respond to the initial challenge question. Do you believe that a periodical like the Daily Camera would be responsible for the murder of JonBenet, or have any ounce of culpability in the murder of JonBenet because they published these details about John Ramsey's business? You heard my take on that. I said a hard no, but I'd love to know what you think, and you can put your responses in the comment section down below. And I will see you on Wednesday for an episode about Jack the Ripper. Until next time.